Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's get straight into it. We're tackling a huge question today. China. Is it really on this unstoppable path to, well, dominating the world? Or is the whole China dream maybe built on foundations that aren't quite as solid as they look?
That's really the core puzzle, isn't it? Every nation is grappling with this. You see this immense projection of power, ambition, whether it's in the South China Sea or rolling out 5G globally.
Right.
But, the sources we've looked at are just as clear about some pretty significant internal problems, these structural weaknesses.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. Try to cut through all the noise, pull out the key facts, and figure out where the balance really lies between the image and the reality.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with the ambition itself. This idea of the China dream, the Zhongguomeng. Xi Jinping really pushed this after 2012. It's more than just like economic growth targets, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's framed as a national calling. The official phrase is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Yeah, and you really have to understand, this whole vision is deeply connected to fixing a historical trauma, what Beijing calls the century of humiliation.
Roughly mid-19th century to 1949.
Exactly. That period when China felt sidelined, exploited by foreign powers.
Yeah.
So the dream is about restoring that lost glory, putting China back, at the center of things.
So regaining that central position. But when we say dominance, we're not necessarily talking about like tanks rolling across borders.
No, probably not primarily military conquest in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
For Beijing, dominance seems to mean fundamentally reshaping the global order itself.
How so?
Economically, technologically, even ideologically. They want China to be the sort of gravitational center, setting the rules, defining the standards for this century.
Okay, so that's the goal. Let's look at how they're trying to achieve it. What are the main tools China's been using to project this power, build this sense of inevitable rise? Economics feels like the big one, historically.
It definitely started there. Manufacturing powerhouse, right? By 2010, no question, China was the world's factory. Yeah.
But the really big strategic move, I think, was the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, launched back in 2013.
Right, the BRI. It's huge. It involves something like 150 countries. And the official line is always win-win cooperation.
It is. But we've also seen a lot of reporting, a lot of analysis suggesting it can be used as a political lever. The big concern you hear is the debt trap. Okay, the debt trap. How real is that? Is it a deliberate strategy or just what happens when risky projects meet vulnerable countries?
That's the debate, isn't it? Intent is hard to prove. But regardless of whether it's planned or just a consequence of maybe poorly structured deals, the outcome can be the same. Massive leverage for Beijing.
Is there a key example?
The classic one is Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. The country couldn't repay the infrastructure loans and ended up granting China a 99-year lease on the port. That really shows the kind of strategic advantage China gains when it becomes the lender of last resort.
Okay, so that's physical infrastructure. But you hear all the time that data is the new oil. So we need to talk technology. Companies like Huawei, ZTE, even TikTok, maybe BYD in electric vehicles.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not just about these companies competing commercially. You have to see it as part of an integrated strategy.
Integrated how?
China isn't just aiming for market share. They seem to be actively trying to dominate future global standards, control data flows. Think 5G networks, exporting AI surveillance systems, digital payment platforms.
So owning the digital plumbing?
Kind of, yeah. If you control a country's digital infrastructure, you have enormous influence over its economy, its information space. They're racing to build the architecture for the digital future.
And while this tech race is happening, the military side hasn't stood still. The People's Liberation Army, the PLA, the modernization pace is, well, stunning.
The speed is really the thing. Think about it. China launched its first aircraft carrier in 2012. That's not long ago.
And now?
Now they have 3 modern carriers, the Liaoning, Shandong, and the new Fujian. They're rapidly building a blue water navy capability.
Plus their navy is technically the largest now.
By number of ships, yes, globally. And we also have to mention the Rocket Force, their missile command. They've shown some, frankly, surprising advances there. Hypersonic weapons, for instance.
Which can target U.S. bases way out in the Pacific.
Right. That really changes the strategic equation in the region, no question.
Okay, economic leverage, tech expansion, military muscle. There's a fourth piece too, right? Controlling the story, the narrative. Information warfare.
Absolutely crucial. If you want global influence, you have to shape how people see the world and how they see you.
How do they do that?
Through massive state media operations, think CGTN, Global Times, cultural outreach like the Confucius Institutes, and increasingly using social media proxies, influencers.
What's the goal there?
Twofold, really. Inside China, it's about ensuring loyalty, reinforcing the party line. Outside China, it's about controlling the global conversation, pushing their narrative, especially in the developing world, challenging that Western-dominated perspective. It's a constant campaign for legitimacy.
Okay, so we've painted a picture of, well, immense projected power. But now let's flip the coin, look inwards. Are these grand ambitions built on solid ground? Or are there significant cracks appearing? Where do we start?
The economy has to be the starting point. It's probably the biggest, most immediate crack. That explosive growth China had for decades, that 10% a year.
Gone.
It's gone. The whole economic model, heavily reliant on debt-fueled infrastructure and property development, seems to be sputtering, maybe even collapsing in parts.
We hear about the property sector all the time. It was, what, nearly a third of their GDP at one point? And giants like Evergrande going bankrupt. That feels symbolic.
It is symbolic, but the risk is very real. It's not just financial fallout. It creates social risks, too. All that debt led to massive overbuilding ghost cities. You can see the fragility in the government's own actions.
Like what?
Well, youth unemployment climbed so high, became such a sensitive issue, that they just stopped publishing the official numbers for a while.
Wow.
Yeah. That tells you something, doesn't it? It suggests the social contract growth delivering stability, especially for young people, is under real strain when you start hiding key data.
It admits there's a problem you can't easily fix.
Exactly. And this economic slowdown directly connects to another trend, the global companies de-risking.
Moving production out.
Yeah. It's not just about lower growth in China. It's about hedging against geopolitical risks, rising labor costs there. Companies are actively shifting manufacturing.
So where?
Places like Vietnam, Indonesia, and significantly India. You see Apple now assembling iPhones in Tamil Nadu. That's not just a business calculation.
It's geopolitics in action, diversifying away from China dependency. But if we're talking long-term structural issues, nothing seems quite as profound as the demographic crisis. The numbers here are, frankly, alarming.
This could be the ultimate check on the China dream. It's an existential threat, really.
Yeah.
By 2024, China's population actually started to shrink, officially, years earlier than most people expected.
And the birth rate.
The census data confirmed it's fallen well below replacement level, significantly fewer babies being born.
So what does that mean down the line?
It means China is heading straight for a demographic cliff. A rapidly aging workforce, fewer young people entering the labor market, and a massive crushing burden from pensions and healthcare for the elderly. There's no easy solution.
What are the projections like?
Pretty stark. By 2050, maybe a third of all Chinese citizens will be over 60 years old. It's very, very hard to project sustained global supremacy when your workforce is shrinking and graying that fast.
That sounds more like managing decline than achieving dominance.
Yeah.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Xi Jinping has consolidated enormous power, right? No term limits, rivals sidelined. Doesn't that centralization give him an advantage? The ability to make big, tough, long-term decisions that messy democracies struggle with.
It can seem like a strength, yes. It allows for decisive action, tactical speed sometimes. But the flip side is strategic fragility. Extreme centralization often leads to policy rigidity.
Also,
Look at the zero-COVID policy fiasco. It showed the danger brutally. When power is so concentrated and dissent is completely crushed, bad news doesn't travel upwards. Or if it does, it gets ignored.
so mistakes don't get corrected.
Exactly. It paralyzes governance, makes it almost impossible to admit a mistake and pivot. When truth itself becomes a casualty of political control, you undermine your ability to lead effectively in the long run.
Okay, so we have this powerful image projected outward, but it seems to be under pressure from these deep internal flaws, economic, demographic, even political rigidity.
Yeah.
Which leads us nicely into the next section. The world isn't just standing by, is it? There's geopolitical pushback.
No, definitely not. The resistance is growing and it's becoming more coordinated, more multilateral.
Like what specifically?
Well, you have clear strategic alignments forming or strengthening. The Quad Alliance, that's India, the US, Japan, Australia, they're actively coordinating on security and economic strategy in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay.
Then there's OUS, the US, UK, Australia Pact, focused on things like nuclear submarines, advanced tech sharing. That's clearly aimed at countering China's military expansion.
And Europe.
Even the European Union, which tries to balance economic ties, has formally labeled China a systemic rival. That's a big shift in language and perception. And you see smaller nations near China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, all significantly boosting their own defense capabilities.
The tension seems most visible in places like the South China Sea. China claims almost all of it with that 9-dash line, builds artificial islands, puts military gear on them. They look pretty solid, those islands.
They are physically there, yes. Those artificial islands are facts on the ground, or rather on the water. But building an island doesn't automatically grant you control of the surrounding sea lanes.
Why not?
Because those waters are vital international shipping routes. And you have a very strong active presence there from other major powers, the US Navy, Japan, Australia, and critically, India. They are all committed to freedom of navigation. So China can claim control, but they can't actually enforce it universally against that kind of combined presence. Their claims have basically pushed everyone else together.
India's role here is interesting. They seem to be playing a careful balancing act, engaging China economically, but also building up serious strategic counterweights.
Absolutely. India is pursuing what you might call competitive coexistence. They offer a different model for Asia, democratic, not authoritarian. And strategically, they hold some key cards.
Such as?
Their Andaman and Nicobar command sits right astride the Malacca Strait, a critical choke point for shipping to and from China. That gives them potential leverage. Plus, their own naval power is growing significantly. New aircraft carriers like the INS Vikrant joining the Vikramaditya. India is a major regional power that Beijing absolutely has to factor in. It limits China's strategic options.
Okay, so there's military and geographic pushback. But you mentioned technology earlier. If we had to pick the single most important arena of competition right now, the one that might really decide 21st century leadership, maybe it's not missiles or ships, maybe it's the chip war.
I think that's increasingly the view, yes. Why? Because advanced semiconductors, those tiny microchips, are the absolute foundation for everything else.
Everything.
Pretty much all future power. AI, high-G communications, advanced computing, next-generation military systems, even sophisticated surveillance. If China can't design and manufacture the most cutting-edge chips domestically,
They remain dependent.
They remain dependent on technology from the US, Taiwan, South Korea, Europe. So the US restrictions on exporting advanced chip technology and targeting companies like Huawei, that's not just trade policy. It's about creating and maintaining a strategic vulnerability, a choke point, potentially far more effective than a naval blockade. It's a fight for the basic building blocks of future power.
Right. This all paints a much more complex picture than just China rising. Let's try to pull it together by looking at some common myths, busting some assumptions. Myth number 1. China's economy will inevitably overtake the U.S. It's just a matter of time.
The reality, that looks increasingly unlikely. Yes, the total GDP is huge. But when you factor in the structural problems we talked about, the debt crisis, the slowing growth rates, the IMF now projects growth below 4% going forward.
And the demographics.
And especially that demographic time bomb. The growing consensus among economists is that China might actually peak economically before it reaches true supremacy over the U.S. The old model just seems exhausted.
Okay, myth 2. The PLA, the Chinese military, is basically invincible now. It could defeat the U.S. or India in a major war.
Reality check. It's largely unproven power. Yes, the hardware looks impressive on paper, new ships, planes, missiles, but the PLA hasn't fought a major conflict since its border war with Vietnam in 1979.
Decades ago.
Decades. They lack the kind of deep, real-world operational experience, the complex logistics, the sophisticated joint command structures that, say, the U.S. military or even India's armed forces have built up over years of operations and exercises. Military strength isn't just about shiny equipment. It's about doctrine, training, experience under fire.
Got it. Myth 3. The Belt and Road Initiative has been a grand success, creating a stable, China-centric global economic empire.
The reality seems quite different. BRI appears to be facing serious headwinds. It's reportedly bleeding money in some areas. We're seeing recipient countries look at Kenya, Pakistan pushing back, demanding debt relief or restructuring, pausing projects.
And the political cost.
Significant reputational damage, too. Remember Italy. The only G7 nation to formally sign up for BRI, they officially pulled out in 2023.
That sends a message.
It really does. If a major European economy decides it's not worth it, that signals serious doubts about the transparency and sustainability of the whole model to other potential partners, especially in the developing world.
Okay, final one. Myth 4. The world is inevitably shifting towards a new global order led by China. A Sino-centric world.
Reality, it looks much more like we're heading towards a genuinely multipolar world, not a return to some Ming Dynasty tribute system where everyone orbits Beijing.
What do you mean by multipolar?
Countries and regions across the globe are asserting their own agency, their own interests. India is a clear example. ASEAN as a bloc. The European Union. Even nations in Africa and Latin America are navigating complex relationships, balancing ties, not just aligning with one superpower. We're seeing multiple independent poles of power emerge, negotiating, competing, cooperating, but not submitting to a single hierarchy.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. What's the big takeaway? China will obviously remain a hugely important, powerful country. We can't deny its influence.
Absolutely. It's a major global player and will continue to be. But what this deep dive suggests is that achieving true, lasting global dominance requires more than just raw economic or military power. It requires legitimacy, requires trust.
And then China's struggling with that.
It seems so. Its approach, often seen as aggressive or coercive, particularly towards its neighbors like the Philippines, Vietnam, Japan, it tends to alienate potential partners. And that highly centralized top-down control model we discussed, the surveillance state, the suppression of dissent, while it might look efficient in the short term,
it stifles innovation.
Exactly. It stifles the creativity, the flexibility, the open debate that really drives long-term technological and economic leadership. You know, the open society model, for all its messiness and inefficiencies, has a built-in resilience, a capacity for self-correction that rigid authoritarian systems often lack.
So wrapping this up, what did this complex picture mean for you, the listener? What should we expect going forward?
Well, Xi Jinping's goal, the Great Rejuvenation, will undoubtedly continue to push China towards being a superpower, perhaps achieving rough parity with the United States in many areas. But undisputed global supremacy, given all the internal pressures and external pushback we've discussed, that seems deeply unlikely.
And there's a historical lesson, perhaps.
Maybe. History often shows that great powers tend to reach their peak influence, their fastest rate of ascent, right before they overreach or encounter internal limits.
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. Could it be that China, despite the powerful image, is actually nearing its zenith already? Remember, the kind of global power that truly endures for centuries usually relies less on fear and coercion and more on trust and shared values. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.